Hello. Hey, yeah, entire city of Los Angeles. Yeah, it is. Hey, it's Ross. Yeah. No. It's been a minute. I heard you guys need a head coach.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, daily fantasy made the way it should be. Simply pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come out at more or less than their Prize Picks projections. You get those right, you can win up to 10 times your entry back. And first-time users are going to get a 100% instant deposit match. Just use the promo code Locked On over at PrizePicks.com. Tell you more about them later, but today's episode, things are heating up a little bit more when it comes to the Sean Payton Sweepstakes. So we're going to dive in. The Los Angeles Chargers losing in embarrassing fashion, 27-0 lead, losing that game on a 31-3 run given up by the Jacksonville, or brought upon by the Jacksonville Jaguars, leading to the largest comeback in playoff history. Is that enough to get Brandon Staley up out of the job in Los Angeles and Sean Payton potentially into that role? And what does that mean for the New Orleans Saints? We'll discuss what a cloud of first-round players could look like for the New Orleans Saints, as well as a 4-round mock draft before the episode is over of what the Saints could do with some Los Angeles Chargers picks. But first, what could the New Orleans Saints even get from the Los Angeles Chargers, and why would the Los Angeles Chargers, who have shown not a very large propensity of spending money over the course of, their existence, why would they make a move for a guy like Sean Payton? Well, I've got 2 easy reasons as to why they would, one of which is more of an example. Another one is kind of a reason. So let's start off here. The reason why the Los Angeles Chargers would make a move for Sean Payton is that you've actually seen them spend more money. And why you could expect that this could be a realistic thing is that you've actually seen them spend more money over the course of the last little bit. They spent all the money to, re-sign and extend Nick Bosa. They go out there and they get Khalil Mack. They spend money on J.C. Jackson. So this is a team that has been willing to spend money here as of late. And what did it do? It took them to the playoffs. Unfortunately, though, they just couldn't get around their biggest issue, which has consistently been their in-game situations, which come down to the head coach. Now, Nick Bosa getting flagged for a bunch of things was a big deal, don't get me wrong, but the whole point of Brandon Staley's deal is that he's a defensive guy. He was a defensive coordinator, all those other things, and his defense gave up a 31-3 run over on the opposite side, while his offense, which is led by a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, came up completely flat in the, I'll say second half, but we know that it goes a little bit beyond that. So that's one thing. The second reason why I think the Los Angeles Rams could make a move, Los Angeles Chargers could make a move here. If I say Rams at any point during this episode, please know I'm talking about the Chargers. Is there any team or set of teams or pair of teams where the NFL wants to see more success than Los Angeles? Than the Los Angeles Chargers and the Los Angeles Rams being in Los Angeles, brand new stadium where the NFL put its headquarters. They have a whole other situation here to where you have these 2 teams in this enormous market, probably the best radio market in the country, one of the best entertainment hubs in the country, the biggest entertainment hub in the country. And this is what you put up. You don't want to be making headlines in Los Angeles because of 27-0 blown leads. You want to be making headlines in Los Angeles because you're winning 27-0 in the playoffs against a clearly inferior team. Shout out to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've loved what they've been doing all season. I think that it's great that they're good right now and that they are winning games, but the expectation here was that the Los Angeles Chargers were going to be able to come in and handily beat the Jacksonville Jaguars and move on in the playoffs. That was the expectation. But you have now a team that spent some money on its roster that could now look to spend money where it has to fix its biggest issue, which is at coach, and playing in a market where the NFL wants to see success. I think it makes a ton of sense that the Chargers could actually make this move. If they did, what could the New Orleans Saints get? Well, they've got first, second, third, fourth, and fifth round picks for the next 3 years. So the Saints would have their pick of the litter here. And one of the things that really helps is that one of the other teams, in fact, the first team that will interview Sean Payton on Tuesday morning on the 17th, is a division rival in the Denver Broncos. So while this doesn't necessarily match Los Angeles Chargers' former MO, could there be enough here to make them change course and say, we want success, go out, get Sean Payton, pair him with Justin Herbert, which would be one of the best decisions that they could make, fleece an AFC West opponent in the process by not allowing him to choose Denver, by getting him to go to Los Angeles, which is where he wants to be in the first place. And then all of a sudden you have a Sean Payton, Justin Herbert, probably Vic Fangio-led defense to contend with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. All of a sudden, you're in conversation here for a team that should be expected to potentially threaten as AFC West champs immediately by making that hiring. That's a huge deal for the Los Angeles Chargers and puts them in a whole other stratosphere in terms of what they have been throughout their history and what they have been throughout their recent history since moving to Los Angeles. That huge move cost them a lot of fans. It cost them a lot. Now you get a Sean Payton and Justin Herbert led team together. All of a sudden you're selling jerseys. All of a sudden you've got a new fan base. All of a sudden you've reignited potentially an old fan base. There's a lot to benefit from here by making this decision if you're the Los Angeles Chargers. So if they did that, they're in a good position to come away with potentially even so much as offering, we'll call it the Gruden package, 2 firsts, 2 seconds. Doesn't mean that that's exactly what they offer. As far as I'm concerned, if you get a pair of picks this year, including a first round pick and a first or second round pick next year, you're good if you're the New Orleans Saints. You'll take that. You're happy with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think you want multiple picks this year, starting with the first rounder, and then you want a top 100 pick at least, a single at least top 100 pick for 2024 as well, if not multiple picks, right? And then you could probably see some other things sprinkled in after that, some late round pick swaps or whatever, right? The New Orleans Saints are definitely in a situation here to where they could move Sean Payton and throw in a little bit of extra draft capital as a swap to move up or move to different spots within, the draft and things like that. So it's not out of the question here for the Los Angeles Chargers. It's certainly not out of the question here for the New Orleans Saints. In fact, this is kind of what you were hoping for as a New Orleans Saints fan. As of now, Brandon Staley, still the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. That's the move that has to precede any potential anything else when it comes to Sean Payton. But you're definitely going to be watching that closely, and blowing a 27-point lead is just about as good as it can get if you're a New Orleans Saints fan that was watching that Los Angeles Chargers game last night. If the New Orleans Saints are able to move into the upper 20s, right, the low 20s with this potential trade here, who are the cloud of players that the Saints all of a sudden have access to in the first round? We spent a lot of time focusing on what the Saints can do in the second round, but there's a really unique cloud of players that they could potentially select from if they get that first round pick in the mid to early 20s. Let's break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made the way that it should be, made super easy. And the thing that I love about it is that it's not you versus mystery lineups. It's not a redraft thing where you're having to shuffle lineups every couple of days, tracking news all week and all that other stuff, or even a daily fantasy situation to where you're going in up against a bunch of mystery lineups competing for a mystery slice of a mystery pot. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just you and your knowledge versus the house. Nice and easy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections. Takes about 60 seconds to get those entries in, and if you get them right, you can win up to 10 times your money back that quick, that easy. And if you're a first-time user, you can get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code LOCKEDON. That's over at the Prize Picks app or on prizepicks.com today. It's promo code LOCKEDON for the 100% instant deposit match. Today's episode also sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp, it's not a crisis line. It's not a self-help situation, anything like that. It is a licensed therapy available worldwide from the comfort of your own home. No waiting rooms, no lines, no traffic, none of that. It's just you and your therapist, and you can connect from home. You can do it via video call. You could do it via phone call. You could do it just through text if you don't want to show your face or anything. They make it super easy and super accessible. I use BetterHelp. I use it all, now not all the time, but I use it for weekly sessions and things like that. And it's huge. It's like going to the gym for your mind, making sure you're like dealing with things so that it doesn't deal with you later. Like it's really good. I'm a big time proponent of therapy, even though it was something I pushed away for a really, really long time. So I could not recommend BetterHelp anymore. So get on. You can learn more and save 10% on your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints could potentially send Sean Payton to the Los Angeles Chargers, a spot we know Sean Payton is very interested in if the Chargers move on from head coach Brandon Staley, which could unlock an entirely new list of possibilities for the New Orleans Saints by getting a late first round selection. I appreciate you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you head over to Locked On Sports today and then get all of the news around the world of sports in about 20 to 25 minutes with all the Locked On local experts bringing you beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes, bringing you the local insight that only Locked On can provide, available wherever you get your podcasts and YouTube as well. So if the New Orleans Saints make this trade, they're going to land a pick that's somewhere around, let's just call it 23. We know that if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose, they jump up a little bit because they have a losing record, so they'd be like 19. We know that around 20 or so is going to go to the Seattle Seahawks that was there. Wherever the Miami Dolphins end up, that pick is forfeited, so that could benefit the Saints. So you're looking for something like 20, and then wherever the New York Giants also finish up. So there's a lot of ways where this, but you're generally speaking, you're looking around like 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there. So who does that put the New Orleans Saints in range of? Well, let me start off with a couple of fan favorites that I know that a lot of people are interested in. Texas running back Bijan Robisnon, running back one in this class, maybe one of the better running back prospects to come out here recently, outside of maybe Kenneth Walker III. He is somebody that can do it all. He is a willing pass blocker as well as just a tenacious and unforgiving runner. You make contact with this guy, you're going to regret it. He can catch out of the backfield. I mean, he was Texas's offense, if we're being honest, the Longhorns offense over there. And so he's somebody that folks have been so excited to see come out of the college ranks and into the NFL for years now. And now he gets that opportunity. Been relatively healthy, or really more than relatively, he's been healthy. And that's huge for his position. He's a little bit more overused than what the Saints usually like to draft at that position coming out of college. But I mean, this is RB1 on everyone's boards. Also easily puts you in range if you really wanted to go running back. I'm not a big proponent of running back in the first round, but Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama, I could see the New Orleans Saints taking that flyer there, especially depending upon how they feel about Alvin Kamara's future with the team. Is he on the roster in 2024? How much do you start to prepare for your next running back situation? Could you have something like what we saw with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, to where as one starts to kind of fade out in your offense, you have another that comes in, you can start to kind of build that up. And Jahmyr Gibbs is basically Alvin Kamara. I mean, this guy does everything out on the field. Phenomenal with the ball in his hands, incredibly elusive, great contact balance, can catch, can run routes. I mean, whatever. So there's a lot of opportunity here to potentially reload that position, get you somebody to pair up with Alvin Kamara, get you somebody that's going to be able to carry you at that position when Alvin Kamara is suspended in 2023, because we expect that will be the case. And then, of course, you have a young guy that 2-3 years down the road may be able to take the reins for you if you and Alvin Kamara end up to a split. So a couple of running backs there. Staying on the offensive side, some exciting wide receivers as well. If you want speed, there's Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. We know the New Orleans Saints love their Tennessee prospects. We also know they love their Ohio State prospects. So could they team Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba back up? That's a possibility. SMU wide receiver Rashee Rice is somebody that fits the mold of what Dennis Allen spoke about not too long ago, about how the team wishes that they had a contested catch wide receiver out there. He caught around 48% of his contested catches throughout his time in 2022 with SMU. So he could be somebody that's very exciting to go out there and maybe not even play his rookie year. If we're being honest, right, not play a ton his rookie year, could get the rookie treatment, which is what we expected for Chris Olave earlier. If the Saints were to bring back, find a way to get things settled with Michael Thomas, which, by the way, is looking less and less likely on top of the $31 million that the Saints would owe him if he's on the roster in June. He also was given a bit of an accelerator or an incentive, kind of an escalator in his contract, where if he appears in a certain number of games, and it's another $30 million on top. So it costs them over $60 million to keep him in 2024 if they kept him in 2023. So not great for the New Orleans Saints there. So that seems to look more like the two are headed towards a split. So that's why a guy like Rashee Rice, who has that big build at 6'3", 200 plus pounds, we'll see what he actually measures into when we get to the combine and stuff like that, which, by the way, I will be in Indianapolis for the combine, so we'll be getting interviews and all that stuff. But he gives you all of a sudden that big body possession contested catch guy, safe first round prospect. A guy like Zay Flowers out of Boston College. It's a little bit more undersized, but gives you a similar build, or not build, but similar production level as well. Good in contested catch situations, fantastic hands, all of that. So good wide receivers that they could add up to, or that they could look at there as well. You're not really going to see a lot of quarterbacks that I'm in love with at the bottom of the first round. Anthony Richardson could potentially be there. I'm not a big Anthony Richardson guy in this year's draft. And so I think maybe you could, if you fall in love with one of these guys that you could potentially get in the second round, like a Max Duggan or or maybe even the third round. I don't want to go so far as a third round, but a Max Duggan, a Hendon Hooker, then all of a sudden those guys could become potential for you at the end of the first round. That might be the way that I go, but they could also look to shore up the offensive line. We know the New Orleans Saints will need a little bit of help on their offensive line, dealing with injuries, things like that. What's the future of this organization at Andrus Peat? Where does that head in a couple of years? Can you get prepared for that? Florida offensive lineman Cyrus Torrence is projected to be around in this area. Nice build, has left guard and right guard experience, spent some time at Louisiana Lafayette as well. So a lot of you that are watching are already familiar with what Torrence can do. Hasn't been credited at least with a sack allowed in his entire career. So if you end up bringing him in, let him kind of develop behind for a year. Andrus Peat and Cesar Ruiz, likely he'll hit the field at some point in the season anyway, and then start to develop so that you have a future plan behind Andrus Peat. Cyrus Torrence could be that guy, and Andrew Voorhees out of USC could be that guy too. I see him as a little bit more of a second round prospect, but as we know, first round grades are few and far between. There's only about 15 guys per team, right? So that means probably at max around 30 guys that get first round grades from NFL teams, and a lot of them end up selected within the first 15 to 20 picks. So toward the back half of the first round, you're usually drafting guys with second round grades anyway. So could you go after an Andrew Voorhees because you really like what he does on the interior? You trust him a lot. 6 years of college football. Is he a little bit too old? I'm not worried about that from the quarterback perspective, so I wouldn't be worried about that from this perspective. But if a team is worried about that, then they might be. 11 career sacks allowed, but has left guard, and right tackle experience during his time. So you draft an offensive lineman, get a fifth-year option, circle back to quarterback in the second round. I guess that's an option. I like getting the fifth-year option on the quarterback personally because I want to maximize that rookie quarterback deal as best as I can. A couple of other guys on the defensive side that could potentially be targets for the New Orleans Saints in the first round would be safety out of Texas A&M, Antonio Johnson. Does a lot of things really well. Big build guy as well. What's his position, though, is going to be the big question. Is he a deep safety? Is he a box safety? Is he a little bit more of a linebacker? Do you bulk him up? There's a lot of different conversations that are going to happen around Antonio Johnson. But the fact of the matter is that he's a playmaker. And so if you get an opportunity at him, that could be a spot that you go for him. And another name that I've seen kind of hover around this area that I'm not, maybe I'm just a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit conservative around the idea of an edge rusher in the first round. Maybe I'm a little bit scarred around that, but Nolan Smith out of Georgia is over there. But I don't think he's top 3 sacks in a single season, and he plays more of an outside linebacker role, a little bit undersized. would have to learn how to put his hand in the dirt, which then comes with developing a pass rushing plan, which then comes with him being a project. And you've heard all this before. So I don't know. I have some guys that I would stay away from too. And some of these edge rushers in the early goings outside of Tyree Wilson are the ones that I would stay away from. And then you can come back to some guys later on where it's not a big deal if they don't develop. So there's a lot of prospects here that the New Orleans Saints could target in the first round if they get that sort of low 20s selection. So let's break that down now. I'm going to do a mock draft here where I go quarterback in the first round to get that 5th-year option, just to kind of illustrate all of the different ways to address some of the other positions where the Saints have need: defensive tackle, safety, running back. And then I'm gonna be greedy and grab myself a big pass catcher as well. So let's break all that down as we get to our mock draft here to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM, my favorite app. I just drafted the offensive rookie of the year, got into the playoffs, haven't made it through the playoffs yet, I haven't gotten to a Super Bowl yet, but I'm figuring it out. And one of the things that I didn't realize that you can actually build based off of scheme. I'm a bit of a dummy. It takes me a little bit of time. I was just loving this game so much that you actually, like, when you draft or when you hire head coaches and offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, they come with schemes. So you match up the scheme of the players that you're drafting and signing in free agency to the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and head coach. And it's awesome. And it accelerates your team so much. And it helped big time with me being able to produce the young quarterback that I just drafted, who was offensive rookie of the year. So big things coming for the New Orleans Voodoo, all right? Or the New Orleans Jazz is what they're called in the game. So looking forward to continuing on with this. Would love to hear more about how things are going for all of y'all too, because I heard a lot of people are playing this and are loving it. I absolutely love this game. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. ultimate-gm.com or search in your app store today, Ultimate Pro Football GM. When you get it, go to the game store, head down to where you can redeem codes, drop the code Locked On in your game shop, and you're going to get a 100% free boost to your franchise as a first-time user. Once again, that is Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a look at like the potential of what you can gather in a trade with the Los Angeles Chargers and what it could turn into for the New Orleans Saints come draft day. Now, I didn't do any additional trades or anything like that. Pro Football Network has the Los Angeles Chargers pick at 22. That's right around, it's probably going to be more like 23, but it's right around where we expect that pick to be. So if the Los Angeles Chargers move on from Brandon Staley and then are interested in Sean Payton should be very interested. They're going to have, goodness gracious, they hire Sean Payton. Then all of a sudden they get Vic Fangio, a defensive coordinator. Any offensive coordinator is going to want to work with Sean as well as Justin Herbert, but not necessarily the play callers out there, because Sean would call the play, so that leaves some of these really good play calling OCs out. So that works out well for the Saints as well. Sean could even keep his old friend Lombardi there, who's that offensive coordinator right now. So there's a lot of things, a lot of ways that this could work out in a positive way for the New Orleans Saints. And not the least of which is being able to find a potential franchise quarterback in the first round of the draft. And so that's the route that I went here. The trade that I did was just the Gruden trade. That might not be what they get. 2024 doesn't really matter in terms of what we're discussing right now. It matters for the team. It will matter when it actually happens. But in this, hyperbolic, sort of hypothetical situation here, we're not worried about the 2024 pick. So I just did first round for 2023, 2024, second round for 2023, 2024. 2024 doesn't really matter here. If the Saints got a first round pick and a second round pick from the Chargers this year, or a first round pick and a third round pick from the Chargers this year, you'd be very happy. So let's start off with what I did here. So at pick 22, as I mentioned, I went with Hendon Hooker, the Tennessee Titans, the Tennessee Volunteers quarterback. Now, as I oftentimes will say when I draft Hendon Hooker in all of my mock drafts, all of this is contingent upon his medicals, right? He had the ACL tear late in the season. How quickly do we think he will be able to get back out onto the field? Is he going to be okay? All those other things. The Saints dealt with this last year, having a quarterback a bit of a little bit older, but not by much, right? And Jameis Winston tearing his ACL on Halloween day, and then not really being full strength at the beginning of the season. Remember, there was a lot of Jameis telling us he's still working through some stuff. He's still progressing, but he's good enough to be out on the field, all these other things. And so, they'll have to see kind of where Hendon Hooker lands and in the medical aspects, and also where they go kind of in free agency too. Do they go after a veteran quarterback, which I think makes sense. If they go after a good enough veteran quarterback, then you draft the young quarterback in the first round, you get the 5th-year option, and then you sit him for a year, and then you start him in 2024. Again, the age thing, I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less about the age thing. That doesn't matter. And a lot of people will say, well, Ross, if you're going to draft Hendon Hooker, the Saints have to make a change on their offensive scheme. And that's what you're kind of expecting them to do as of right now anyway, is potentially make changes at offensive coordinator. So that question might be answered as quickly as this week. At pick 40, which would be the New Orleans Saints' original second round selection, I went with Siaki Ika, who is the defensive tackle. You might remember him from LSU. Most recently played at Baylor. He was a part of that rotation during the 2019 championship season for LSU. Transferred, ended up going to Baylor, of course, where there's a connection there with their head coach, and plays extremely well. He is a big nose tackle. You're talking about 6'4", 350 or so pounds. He is the Malcolm Brown that the New Orleans Saints had been trying to replace since they traded away Malcolm Brown to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so he can be a guy that helps you get that push on the interior. I think if the Saints bring back their defensive interior as it was this season, David Onyemata-Shai, Tuttle, Malcolm Roach, and then potentially Kentavious Street, who I'd love to see back in New Orleans, and then you just add one of these big nose tackle guys that can eat up some blocks, create some one-on-one opportunities for the edge rushers over on the outside, and get a good push in the interior. It fixes a lot of the stuff that the New Orleans Saints struggled with in 2022. Speaking of that unit, by the way, Ryan Nielsen, co-defensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, getting an interview with the Atlanta Falcons as their defensive coordinator position is open with Dean Pease having retired. They've requested permission. It's likely the Saints will grant them permission. One of the things that the Saints never get in the way of is advancement for their guys, unless it's LSU and they did it wrong. But they'll never get in the way of that. So with Ryan Nielsen going from co-defensive coordinator to potentially defensive coordinator in Atlanta, that's considered a promotion. Clubs can't block those either. I spoke with a high-ranking NFL official about that, or executive about that, to make sure. And so the Saints very likely wouldn't even get in the way either. So something to watch. All right, pick number 55, which is the second round selection that I got from the Los Angeles Chargers here. I went with tight end out of Georgia, Darnell Washington, who was still there. I don't know if he would be there this late in the second round. I know his ball security issues are a thing, so that might end up impacting that. But man, at 6'6", 6'7", 260 plus pounds, being a big time pass catcher, being an outstanding blocker, just getting it all done, and being a little bit of a contested catch guy as well, that helps. And so if you want something that you can't teach, but that will translate to the NFL, it's size. And Darnell Washington has the size and he has the athleticism. That's stuff you can't teach. And that's the kind of stuff that the New Orleans Saints could potentially fall in love with and pair him up with Juwan Johnson as the tight end duo of the future, while Adam Troutman takes over kind of the Nick Vanette, Josh Hill blocking role and everything like that. That's a really, really solid unit for the New Orleans Saints. And of course, you add in Taysom Hill there as well. At pick 71 in the third round, I tried to do something unique here, tried to do something a little bit different. Couldn't really find anybody that I was in love with here, particularly at wide receiver, which is kind of what I was looking at. So I decided to go over to the defensive side. You're going to need to address safety at some point behind the two starters, Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. Presently, the Saints have no safeties under contract. Daniel Sorensen's on his way out. Justin Evans is on his way out. JT Gray's on his way out. Now, one of those guys, two of those guys, all three of those guys could potentially be re-signed during free agency. We don't know that at this time, though. So I drafted Brandon Joseph. Good size. Great athleticism, does a little bit of everything. You trust him a little bit more in the box, which I think works for the Saints. But the fact that you can kind of have him do a little bit of everything works well with Tyrann Mathieu. You're going to need to find some quality safety somewhere to step in place of Marcus May, who also is expected to see a suspension in 2023. I like Brandon Joseph as that guy. And then finally, in the fourth round here to wrap up this mock draft, I just kind of wanted to do the top 100-ish selection. So this is pick 112 overall. I went with Tajay Spears. So Tajay Spears, the running back out of Tulane. I didn't reach for a running back in the first round. Like I mentioned, first round running backs, not really a thing for me. You could grab one in the second round. You would have 2 second round picks here. You could potentially package and move up, all these other things. I didn't get that creative with it, but I went with Tajay Spears. I want Tajay Spears to stay in New Orleans. He is Everything that the New Orleans Saints should want in a running back this offseason can do everything. Had a phenomenal Cotton Bowl and everything too to kind of help raise his draft stock a little bit, get seen in the public eye. He'll run his, hopefully he'll get opportunities to do more of those offseason workouts and put up some of those testing numbers and things like that. He will have to address ball security for sure, but that's something the New Orleans Saints can work with and can help to make better. And the other pieces, we'll see him in Mobile. And there's, these guys that are going to be on the list in terms of the Senior Bowl. We know that that's a prime spot where the New Orleans Saints love to get to know talent and then love to select talent out of. So I think Tyjae Spears is somebody to definitely keep an eye out on. So that was Hendon Hooker, the quarterback out of Tennessee in the first round, get that 5th-year option. Siaki Ika out of the defensive tackle out of Baylor, get that big nose tackle to get you the push. Darnell Washington, the tight end out of Georgia, whether or not he's there that late in the second round, it's whatever. I was able to grab him, so I did, but gives you a contested catch guy, big time athleticism, all that. Brandon Joseph, safety out of Notre Dame, versatile, good size. And then Tyjae Spears, the guy that the New Orleans Saints should absolutely want to add to their running back room behind Alvin Kamara out of Tulane. So that's a little mock draft for you in terms of what you can potentially get here. Looking at where you could get some selections from the Los Angeles Chargers. This would be huge for the New Orleans Saints. But remember, it all has to be predicated by the Los Angeles Chargers moving on from Brandon Staley. If that happens, then all of a sudden, this stuff really starts to pick up steam. So we'll be watching for that here all throughout the week. I appreciate y'all, as always, for making me your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today as well. Coming up tomorrow, on Tuesday, we'll just continue to follow up on everything going on with Sean Payton. What would it mean to lose Ryan Nielsen? We'll answer that question. And what's going on with the New Orleans Saints coaching staff? Why aren't they making changes? And is it getting too late? I'll tell you why it's not on Tuesday's episode as well. I appreciate you so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, a part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.